The United States has been at war for more than a decade. Although we are trying to wind down in Afghanistan, we are still there, and American military personnel are still getting killed and wounded. This follows the same kind of pattern we saw in Iraq, where, even though we are now mostly out, the bloodshed continues. In fact, it's increasing, and we may get sucked back in. So many of those who were not killed in these two conflicts, and I only refer to these two conflicts because they are the most recent, have been seriously hurt, physically and or mentally. Indeed, some of those wounds are not visible. They are on the inside, and those who bear them may never get completely well from them. This coming Friday, we will celebrate another Independence Day, the 4th of July. There will be parades and fireworks, cookouts and picnics, and there will be speeches. Scads of speeches, piles of speeches, tons of speeches. Most of these speeches will be made by people in positions of power, the kinds of people in the kinds of positions that determined whether or not we would go to war in the first place. And few of such folks had any real and personal stake in those decisions. Rightly or wrongly, they sent other people's children to fight and maybe die. Now they will extol the valor of our soldiers and sailors and airmen, male and female, and they will talk about the great traditions of a country that will do anything to defend its freedom and strive to bring it to the rest of the world. They will talk about sacrifice, the sacrifice of those who have done and are doing that fighting and dying. And at the very time when the medical care being offered to our wounded warriors is often proving to be scandalously inadequate. Now, I don't want here to just be picking on politicians. They are not the only ones who talk about sacrifice. They are not the only ones who go out of their way to give a warm and appreciative welcome to our military men and women when they come home and thank them for their service. They are not the only ones who sound the call to arms and yell patriotic slogans demanding no retreat and ultimate victory. Those folks are us. The same folks who scream even more loudly if we are expected to make any sacrifices to support a war effort by actually paying for it. Apparently, we are not like the greatest generation, those of the World War II era who gave up something like comfort and convenience and money to support those who have been sent overseas to fight our battles. We have learned a few things since the end of the Vietnam conflict. Largely because of the divided feelings about that war, we did not treat very well the returning combat veterans. More often than not, they were either abused or ignored because they had fought in an unpopular action, even though it was not their idea to go and fight, and regardless of how much they had suffered in service to their country. So now we make sure we express our gratitude and admiration, but we still don't want to personally feel the effects of what's happening over there. I suspect that nobody can really know what it's like to be in a war unless one has been there, done that. And I also suspect that nobody can really know what it's like to have a loved one killed or wounded in battle unless it is one's own son or daughter, spouse or parent, brother or sister who is dead or hurt. But perhaps especially as we celebrate this Independence Day, we can take a look at what has been said about such experiences and try to put ourselves in the shoes of those doing the suffering and making the sacrifices, particularly since we're not. James Bradley wrote a book which was made into a movie entitled Flags of Our Fathers. He was in Washington, D.C. some years ago to say goodbye to his father just before he died. And now he was scheduled to speak at the Iwo Jima Memorial. You know about the Iwo Jima Memorial, don't you? It's the largest bronze statue in the world, and duplicating the image created by one of the most famous photographs in history, depicts the raising of the American flag by 6 soldiers on a rocky hilltop on that island after a very costly victory had been won. Standing at the base of the statue the day before his speech, Bradley saw some buses stop and unload. Aboard had been over 100 8th graders from Clinton, Wisconsin. He asked them where they came from, and when they told him, he said, "Hey, I'm a cheesehead too. Come gather around, cheeseheads, and I will tell you a story." He introduced himself, indicating that he came from Antigo, Wisconsin, told them about the book he had written, and proceeded to speak about the men portrayed behind him on that statue. He said 6 boys raised the flag. The first guy putting the pole in the ground is Harlan Block. Harlan was an all-state football player. He enlisted in the Marine Corps with all the senior members of his football team. They were off to play another type of game, a game called war. But it didn't turn out to be a game. Harlan, at the age of 21, died with his intestines in his hands. I don't say that to gross you out. I say that because there are people who stand in front of this statue and talk about the glory of war. You guys need to know that most of the boys in Iwo Jima were 17, 18, and 19 years old, and it was so hard that the ones who did make it home never even would talk to their families about it. You see this next guy? That's Renee Gagnon from New Hampshire. If you took Renee's helmet off at the moment this photo was taken and looked at the webbing of that helmet, you would find a photograph of his girlfriend. Renee put that in there for protection because he was scared. He was 18 years old. It was just boys who won the Battle of Iwo Jima. The next guy, the third in this tableau, was Sergeant Mike Strank. Mike is my hero. He was the hero of all these guys. They called him the old man because he was so old. He was already 24. When Mike would motivate his boys in training camp, he didn't say, "Let's go kill some Japanese," or "Let's die for our country." He knew he was talking to little boys. Instead, he would say, "You do what I say, and I'll get you home to your mothers." The last guy on this side of the statue is Ira Hayes, a Pima Indian from Arizona. Ira Hayes was one of them who lived to walk off Iwo Jima. He went into the White House with my dad. President Truman told him, "You're a hero." Hayes later told reporters, "How can I feel like a hero when 250 of my buddies hit the island with me and only 27 of us walked off alive?" You take your class of school, 250 of you spending a year together having fun, doing everything together. Then all 250 of you hit the beach, but only 27 of your classmates walk off alive. That was Ira Hayes. He had images of horror in his mind. Ira Hayes carried the pain home with him and eventually died dead drunk, face down, drowned in a very shallow puddle at the age of 32, 10 years after the picture was taken. The next guy going around the statue is Franklin Sousley from Hilltop, Kentucky. A fun-loving hillbilly boy. His best friend, who is now 70, told me, "Yeah, we took 2 cows up on the porch of the Hilltop General Store. Then we strung wire across the stairs so the cows couldn't get down. Then we fed them Epsom salts." You can imagine what happened. Franklin died on Iwo Jima at the age of 19. When the telegram came to tell his mother that he was dead, it went to the Hilltop General Store. A barefoot boy ran that telegram up to his mother's farm. The neighbors could hear her scream all night and into the morning. Those neighbors lived a quarter of a mile away. The next guy, as we continue to go around the statue, is my dad, John Bradley, from Antigo, Wisconsin, where I was raised. My dad lived until 1994, but he would never give interviews. When Walter Cronkite's producers or the New York Times would call, we were trained as little kids to say, "No, I'm sorry, sir, my dad's not here. He is in Canada fishing." "No, we don't know when he's coming back." My dad never fished or even went to Canada. Usually he was sitting right there at the table eating his Campbell's soup. But we had to tell the press that he was out fishing. He didn't want to talk to the press. You see, like Ira Hayes, my dad didn't see himself as a hero. Everyone thinks these guys are heroes because they are in a photo and on a monument. My dad knew better. He was a medic. John Bradley from Wisconsin was a combat caregiver. On Iwo Jima, he probably held over 200 boys as they died. And when boys died on Iwo Jima, they writhed and screamed without any medication or help with the pain. When I was a little boy, my third grade teacher told me that my dad was a hero. When I went home and told my dad that, he looked at me and said, "I want you always to remember that the heroes of Iwo Jima are the guys who did not come back. Did not come back." So that's the story about 6 nice young boys. 3 died on Iwo Jima, and 3 came back as national heroes. Overall, 7,000 boys died on Iwo Jima in the worst battle in the history of the Marine Corps. My voice is giving out, so I will end here. Thank you for your time. When Bradley was done, the students and teachers he had been talking to realized that the monument was far more than just a big piece of metal with a flag sticking out of the top. It came to life for them through the heartfelt words of a son who did indeed have a father who was a hero, whether or not that father ever thought so or admitted it. A hero. Maybe not necessarily for the reasons most people would assume, but a hero nonetheless. On Friday, when we celebrate Independence Day, let's make sure we remember the heroic sacrifices of the men and boys, like those who raised the flag on Iwo Jima, who have given so much throughout the history of our country, so that we can be free to observe the 4th of July and all that it means. And let's remember the heartache and pain of those who have loved those who have been killed and wounded fighting for their country, because these too have sacrificed and suffered above and beyond. And let's remember, as indicated in our scripture reading from Psalms, that there is a divine power in the universe, a divine power we call God, who has somehow created this vast and glorious world for us to live in, but at a price. There is always a price for securing and protecting that which is good, a price like that paid by the heroes of Iwo Jima. And let's remember that when the people of a country try to live according to the precepts which they believe come from such a God, precepts which call for love and sacrifice, compassion and tolerance, acceptance and unselfishness, that country will prosper. And let's remember that all wars, from the Revolutionary War to today's wars on terrorism, may and should be questioned as to their legitimacy, but those fighting them in the service of their country should be accorded nothing but honor and appreciation. Let me conclude with a bit of an aside concerning that statue in Washington, D.C. If you look at it very closely, you will see 13 hands on the pole holding the flag being raised over Iwo Jima by 6 Marines. When the man who made the monument was asked why, he replied that the 13th hand was that of God.